The sun had barely risen over the jagged hills when Jonas Whitaker rode out from his ranch, the reins taut in his calloused hands. Dust clung to his coat and streaked across his weathered face, marking the life he'd built with nothing but sweat, muscle, and stubborn pride. His land stretched for miles, fenced in by time-worn wooden posts. Yet that morning, the quiet he usually cherished felt brittle, like a thin sheet of ice ready to crack. Something was wrong. He spotted them at the edge of the canyon, a small group of riders, their silhouettes tense, deliberate. At their center was a young girl, no more than 14, her arms bound and her head bowed. Her dress was torn, dirt streaked across her cheeks, and her eyes, sharp and terrified, darted between the men like a cornered animal. Jonas's stomach tightened. He had heard rumors of auctions where children were sold like livestock to settle debts, punish families, or line the pockets of cruel men. But he had never imagined seeing it in person. The leader of the group barked a command, and the girl flinched. She was trembling, but there was a fire in her gaze, a defiance that had somehow survived whatever horrors had led her here. Jonas reined in his horse, heart hammering. His ranch had always been a sanctuary for him alone, a place where he controlled the world within its borders. Yet now, as he watched the girl being marched toward an unknown fate, a surge of purpose overtook him. He didn't hesitate. Spurring his horse forward, Jonas galloped across the dusty plain, kicking up clouds that swallowed the morning light. He arrived just as the men reached a crude pen at the edge of town, where the auction was to be held. His voice cut through the morning air, rough and commanding. "Let her go." The men laughed, sharp and cold. "This doesn't concern you, Whitaker," the tallest one said, stepping forward. "Turn around and ride home before you get hurt." Jonas's hand hovered near his holster. "I said let her go." His voice carried the weight of a man who had faced danger all his life, who had learned that hesitation could mean death. The girl looked up at him then, fear and hope clashing in her wide eyes. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to believe that someone might actually care. The leader snorted. "You're alone. She's ours." He raised a whip, cracking it through the air. The girl flinched, but she didn't cry. Jonas could see the resolve building in her jaw, the tight line of her shoulders. She wasn't going down without a fight. Without thinking, Jonas drew his gun, the shot ringing out before anyone could react. Chaos erupted. The men scattered, some reaching for weapons, others diving for cover. Jonas seized the moment and lunged forward, grabbing the girl's arm and pulling her behind him. She stumbled at first, then found her footing, matching his pace as they ran toward the cover of the rocks. They hid in the shadows of a narrow ravine, gasping for breath. The girl's hands were shaking uncontrollably. Jonas pulled a cloth from his pocket and offered it to her. "Here, calm yourself." I can't go back," she whispered, voice trembling. "They'll find me. They always do." Jonas looked into her eyes, seeing the truth of her words etched into every line of her face. "Then don't go back. Come with me. My ranch isn't far. I'll keep you safe." For a moment, she just stared at him, disbelief and relief warring in her gaze. Then she nodded, silently accepting the offer of sanctuary. Together, they moved as quietly as shadows, making their way across the rugged terrain toward Jonas's home. By midday, they reached the edge of his property. Jonas pushed open the creaking gate, and the girl paused, taking in the sprawling fields, the livestock grazing lazily, and the simple homestead that had been his life for years. "This is yours?" she asked, awe tinged with hesitation. "Mine," he confirmed. "But not anymore. Now it's yours too, if you want it." She swallowed hard, words failing her. Jonas could see the faint glimmer of a smile, fragile but real, as she followed him inside. Inside the house, Jonas set down his gun and motioned for her to sit, rest, eat something. "You've been through hell." He returned with a loaf of bread and some water. She accepted it silently, her hands shaking as she ate. Jonas watched her, noting the scars along her wrists and the haunted look in her eyes. She had been hunted, threatened, and yet she had survived. That survival instinct, fierce, raw, unbroken, was what made him certain she could endure whatever came next. Hours passed. and the sun dipped low behind the hills. The wind carried whispers from the canyon, and Jonas felt a prickle of unease. Something was coming. He couldn't explain it, but he knew the danger was far from over. Suddenly, the faint sound of horses approached from the valley below, too many to count from this distance. Jonas stiffened. His heart pounded as he watched the shadows grow longer, the riders moving with purpose. "Stay inside," he whispered to the girl. She hesitated, then obeyed, her fear mirrored in the tight clutch of her hands. Jonas moved to the porch, eyes narrowing. The riders were disciplined, riding in formation like soldiers, not bandits, not criminals. But who were they? And were they coming for the girl or for him? The first rider broke from the line, moving ahead of the others. Jonas's pulse spiked as he recognized the figure. A man tall and commanding, his coat dark as night, eyes cold and assessing. Behind him, more riders emerged from the shadows, nearly 400 strong, their arrival sudden and overwhelming. The ground seemed to quake under the thundering hooves. The girl's small voice reached him through the door. Who are they?" Jonas swallowed hard. "I don't know yet, but they're here for you." The realization hit the girl like a physical blow. She sank to the floor, trembling, tears spilling freely. Jonas crouched beside her, offering the only comfort he could. "You're not alone anymore. Whatever comes next, you won't face it by yourself." From the distance, the riders halted, forming a massive circle around the ranch. The ground shivered with the weight of their numbers, and yet there was no immediate attack. Jonas's mind raced. Were they enemies or saviors? And if saviors, why so many? The girl's trembling lessened slightly as she pressed herself against him. Why are they here?" she whispered, voice cracking. Jonas looked out at the vast expanse of disciplined men, their horses standing like sentinels. "Because," he said slowly, watching the glint of sunlight on their weapons, "someone believes you matter, and they've come to make sure you're safe." The tension hung thick in the air, and for the first time in days, the girl allowed herself to hope, because in the presence of these strangers, disciplined and unyielding, she understood something simple, yet profound. She had a chance to be free. And Jonas knew, with an unshakable certainty, that whatever happened next, he would protect her with every breath he had. The girl, whose name Jonas had only recently learned was Lila, clung to his side as the first of the riders dismounted. The ground trembled beneath the hooves of those still circling the ranch, a relentless reminder that time and safety were illusions. Jonas's eyes swept across his property, calculating every angle, every potential hiding place. He had faced outlaws and storms before, but this was different. The sheer number of them, disciplined and silent, spoke of purpose, not chaos. From the main line of riders, a man stepped forward, his boots sinking slightly into the loose earth. His coat was black, the cut precise, and his gaze cold, almost unreadable. Yet there was something about him that carried authority unquestioned and absolute. Jonas instinctively stepped in front of Lila, his hand resting on his gun. "State your business," he demanded, voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. The man's eyes scanned the ranch with practiced efficiency. "We are here for the girl," he said finally. His tone was calm, almost too calm, as if words alone carried the weight of action. "She is to come with us." Jonas's jaw tightened. "She's safe here. I don't care who you are, you're not taking her." The man in black tilted his head slightly, as if studying a puzzle that wasn't quite complete. "You misunderstand. We are not your enemies. We are here because she has been wronged, and because her freedom was stolen before she even had a chance to live it. But you," he said, eyes narrowing, "you acted without permission." Jonas bristled. "She's been through enough. If anyone's taking her anywhere, it will be me, on my terms. Do you understand?" The man's lips twitched, almost imperceptibly. "We understand," he said, and with a subtle signal, the riders formed a protective semicircle around the ranch. They did not advance. They did not threaten, yet the weight of their presence was inescapable. Jonas could feel it in his chest, a pressure that demanded acknowledgement. Lila's fingers dug into Jonas's sleeve. Who are they?" she whispered. Her voice quavered with a mixture of fear and awe. Jonas knelt beside her. "I don't know all of them, but I do know this: whatever comes next, we'll face it together. They didn't come here to hurt you." The girl's eyes searched his, looking for reassurance. Jonas met her gaze and offered a small nod. "Trust me, just for now." Hours stretched as they waited, the sun inching toward the horizon, shadows creeping longer across the ranch. The riders remained silent, almost statuesque, their horses shifting occasionally, but never breaking formation. Jonas knew this was a test not of strength, but of patience. The girl needed to see that she had allies, that not everyone in this world sought to exploit or harm her. Finally, the man in black moved closer, dismounting with fluid precision. "Jonas Whitaker," he said, voice carrying over the plain, "your actions have ensured her safety, for now. But we cannot stay long. There are those who would see her return to chains, and if we delay, we risk everything." Jonas stood, dusting off his coat. "Then tell me what you want from me." The man regarded him silently for a long moment. "She will travel with us to safety. You will accompany her. There will be no questions. Your role is simple. Ensure she reaches the next stage alive, unharmed, and with her freedom intact." Jonas hesitated. "And if I refuse?" A shadow of a smile flickered across the man's face. "Then you would make an enemy of 400 men who do not take refusal lightly. But we do not wish to force your hand. You have shown yourself capable, and so we offer choice." The girl's hand found Jonas's again, gripping tightly. Her trust, fragile and precious, anchored him. He took a deep breath, letting the tension in his shoulders ease just enough to think clearly. "Then we'll go," he said finally. "But we go together." The riders moved silently, forming a protective column as Jonas led Lila to his own horse. She climbed on behind him, her arms around his waist, and for the first time in days, there was a sense of direction, a plan. They were no longer running blindly. They had a path forward. As the column began to move, Jonas could feel the energy of the riders around him. Each one was disciplined, alert, and unyielding, yet they radiated a strange sort of calm. This wasn't just a rescue, it was a declaration. Every step, every movement, was a promise that Lila would not be left to the mercy of those who had hunted her. The journey was arduous. The terrain shifted from rocky hills to dense forests, the path winding and treacherous. But the riders maintained formation, moving as one, shielding Lila from sight and danger. Jonas marveled at their coordination, the way every rider seemed to know instinctively where to be, how to move, without direct orders. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. 400 souls, acting as a single, unbreakable entity. At night, they made camp in a clearing. Fires flickered, casting dancing shadows across the forest floor. Jonas helped Lila down, keeping her close as she surveyed the makeshift camp with wide eyes. They really trust me?" she asked quietly. Jonas shook his head. "No, but they'll follow my lead because they trust what I do. And right now, what matters is keeping you alive." The night was long, filled with whispered instructions and the occasional murmur of horses. Jonas kept watch, rifle at his side, eyes scanning the tree line. Lila slept lightly, her small body pressed against his back. For all the fear that clung to her, there was also something remarkable: resilience, a determination to survive that mirrored his own. When dawn broke, the riders prepared to move again. The forest opened into a wide plain, and from that vantage point, Jonas saw the full extent of their numbers. 400 men, disciplined and silent, spread across the landscape like a living shield. For the first time, he understood the magnitude of what had come to aid them. This was not a simple rescue. This was a force of nature, and they were here for one purpose: to see Lila safe. Jonas looked down at her, brushing a strand of dirt-streaked hair from her face. "Are you ready?" he asked. She nodded, determination in her eyes replacing some of the fear. "Ready." The riders began to move again, faster now, a rhythmic thunder across the plain. Jonas felt the tension in his chest give way to something else: hope. They were not alone. They would not be caught. And no matter what challenges awaited them, the girl would survive. For the first time since he had met her, Jonas allowed himself a small, fleeting smile. The rescue had begun, and somehow, against all odds, he believed it would succeed. The first light of dawn stretched across the plains like molten gold, revealing the sheer magnitude of the force that had arrived. 400 warriors, disciplined and imposing, lined the ridges and valleys surrounding Jonas's ranch. Horses pawed at the earth in unison, their riders poised, weapons ready, yet their eyes held no malice. This was not an army bent on conquest. This was a tide of protection, an unyielding promise that Lila would not be touched by the cruelty that had hunted her for so long. Jonas felt a tremor of awe ripple through him as he watched the warriors descend from the high ground, moving with precision, forming a perimeter that was both unbreakable and protective. Lila clung to his side, trembling, but there was a spark of recognition in her gaze. She understood now that she was not alone. She had allies, strength in numbers, and a community who had chosen to see her not as property, not as a prize, but as a person worth saving. One of the leaders, a woman with a tall frame and eyes like polished steel, approached Jonas and Lila. She dismounted with a fluid grace that spoke of years of experience. "Jonas Whitaker," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the field. "You did what needed to be done. She is safe because of you. But this is only the beginning. She belongs to no one but herself now, and we are here to ensure that no one can take that away." Lila looked up at Jonas, tears in her eyes. They came for me?" she asked, voice choked with disbelief. Jonas nodded, pulling her into a protective embrace. "Yes, and they're here to make sure you stay free." The warriors began moving forward, creating a path between the ranch and the edge of the valley. Jonas mounted his horse with Lila behind him, feeling the strength of the formation that surrounded them. For the first time in her life, Lila was not running from danger, she was moving toward freedom, supported by those who would fight without hesitation to see her safe. As they rode, the enormity of the journey became clear. These were not mere soldiers or hired guns. They were guardians, trained and united, each one committed to the protection of the girl who had been cruelly torn from her life. Jonas realized that the stakes were no longer just about survival. This was about justice, reclamation, and the restoration of a life stolen too soon. The path led them through narrow canyons and across windswept plains, the riders moving with an almost ceremonial rhythm. Lila's fear gradually gave way to awe, and then to a tentative trust in the men and women who surrounded them. Every glance, every subtle gesture reassured her that she was no longer a pawn to be bartered or hunted. She had a place in the world now, and it was one that she could call her own. As the day progressed, the warriors' numbers and discipline became a shield that no threat could penetrate. When they reached a river crossing, Jonas led Lila to the bank, letting her drink from the clear water, while the warriors formed a protective circle around them. It was in this quiet moment that Lila truly began to understand the depth of what had been done for her. She had been saved, not for the convenience of others, not for profit or influence, but because someone had decided that her life had intrinsic value. Evenings brought campfires and quiet reflection. Lila sat beside Jonas, the warmth of the flames reflecting in her eyes. "I never thought I'd see something like this," she said softly. "I never thought anyone would care enough to come for me." Jonas shook his head, voice low and steady. "Some people do care, and some people will act when it matters most. You're worth the fight, Lila. Don't ever forget that." The warriors, sensing the completion of their mission, began to disperse methodically, returning to their posts on the surrounding hills. One by one, they vanished into the distance, leaving Jonas and Lila alone for the first time since the ordeal began. But the bond they had formed, the knowledge that so many had acted to protect her, would remain with her forever. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues as Lila finally allowed herself to breathe freely. She had survived the auction, the flight, and the constant fear that had defined her young life. Now, with Jonas at her side and the memory of 400 warriors' unwavering protection, she could envision a future filled with possibility. Jonas watched her, noting the way she lifted her head, her posture a subtle declaration that she would no longer be anyone's victim. "You're safe now," he said quietly, almost to himself, "and no one can take that from you." Lila's lips curved into a tentative smile. I think I can finally start living," she whispered. Jonas nodded. "Yes, and we'll make sure of it, step by step, day by day." As the first stars appeared overhead, the silence of the plains was no longer oppressive. It was a silence of triumph, of lives reclaimed, of freedom earned. Lila knew that her past would never be forgotten, but for the first time, it did not dictate her future. The story of her rescue would be whispered across towns and valleys, of a rancher who refused to stand idle, of courage that defied fear, and of a force that arrived in overwhelming strength to ensure justice and protection. It was a tale of hope, resilience, and the unbreakable human spirit. And now, as the fire crackled and the night wrapped the world in shadows, Lila and Jonas looked toward the horizon together, knowing that while challenges would come, they had already overcome the impossible. They had faced fear, cruelty, and danger, and emerged stronger, bonded, and free. If this story inspired you, take a moment to reflect on the power of courage, empathy, and standing up for those who cannot defend themselves. Share it, talk about it, and let it remind you that one act of bravery can change a life forever. And remember, true strength lies not in isolation, but in protecting and uplifting others when it matters most.